Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Move Better, Feel Better Feldenkrais Awareness Summit. We're so glad that you're back with us. And I'm very pleased to introduce you to Larry Goldfarb. Larry has his PhD from the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. He is a movement scientist. He's a Feldenkrais practitioner trainer. And he's been training all around the world, Europe, Australia, North America, for the last 20 years, I think, maybe. Somewhere the time keeps flying, doesn't it, Larry? He's the founder of Mind in Motion and Mind in Motion Online. He's been certainly one of the pioneers in digital sources for the work. He writes a lot about the Feldenkrais method, tries to make it more understandable for us, and he has a private practice in Santa Cruz. You know, and I'm really excited to have this particular track, which is Spirituality Meets Physiology, and partly that just came about because of Larry's suggestion for this topic, which is prayer. Welcome, Larry.
Thanks a lot. I'm glad to be here, Cynthia.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So, you know, it's interesting, this idea of prayer and how it might fit somehow in with the Feldenkrais work. Of course, most of us as practitioners have struggled a bit with people thinking that the Feldenkrais method might be a religion, might be something that would be in conflict with their particular spiritual beliefs or guide them in a different place. And maybe we should just start a little bit with that issue.
Well, you know, it's funny, in Germany, since Kreis means circle, you know, people would think it's a folk dance or it's a crop circle, you know, circle in a field. Whereas in the US especially, but in English-speaking countries, I think sometimes people hear the founder's Russian name as Feldenkrais, right? And you know, and I've had people even joke about that sometimes with me, and sometimes people get a little uncomfortable, and often people ask, "Is that a religion?" And you know, so I think the association is there because of the way the word sounds, in particular, and you know, my interest in I mean, I find the name that you chose for this track really fascinating. I started a couple of years ago by teaching a summer camp called The Peculiar Power of Prayer, and that had really it had come out of my as so much of what I do does, it comes out of the work I do with other people and the work that I'm doing with myself. And so I mean, I got, at some point, I got really interested in the movements of prayer because, you know, there's a similarity between doing an awareness through movement lesson, you know, a lesson where the Feldenkrais teacher is talking the student or students through a series of movements. There's a similarity between that and prayer, and the similarity for me is that there's in both, I don't know, activities, if you want, both things that we do, the way that we, you know, it's funny to say in English, carry ourselves, our comportment, that's kind of an old-fashioned word, our behavior, the way that changes our experience of ourselves. So to be really simple about it, our movement changes our consciousness, or the way we notice ourselves. I mean, consciousness is a pretty, you know, awareness. Our movement changes our awareness or our consciousness. And I was interested in, you know, I didn't want to, I didn't and I don't want to reduce prayer and awareness through movement to the same thing. I was looking at the similarities, and I think there's another similarity, which is really important to me, and that's the practice. The fact that, I mean, prayer isn't, you know, it's not something you do once. And having a Feldenkrais as I like to think that I'm a Feldenkrais practitioner first, that I practice the method in my life, and I teach it to others, and I train other people in how to do it. But I wouldn't want to be a teacher who doesn't practice the method, right? It comes out of my experience. So I was really interested in, like, if we approach prayer as Feldenkrais teachers, what do we learn? And what do we learn about having a practice? The thing that fascinates me is that, I want to think about prayer from a Feldenkrais perspective. And I also, part of being a Feldenkrais teacher is thinking about movement from a scientific point of view. It is for me. Like you said, I'm a movement scientist. And Moshe Feldenkrais, the founder of our method, was really, he was an engineer, and he was really curious about how the brain worked. And his thinking, the way that he thought about the nervous system, certainly didn't fit with the way most people thought about it at the time. So my interest in prayer, has to do with thinking about the relationship between movement and awareness from a scientific point of view, from the point of view of prayer, of spiritual practice, and how both of these perspectives can inform our practice as Feldenkrais teachers, and maybe what we have to offer for people, or to people who have a spiritual practice, a prayer practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking about it myself. It's Feldenkrais is definitely, well, I don't think it's a spiritual practice. It's certainly not a religion.
Mm-hmm.
But it does seem very compatible with any spiritual practice, or at least those spiritual practices which value grace instead of punishment. And so just to recognize that there are spiritual practices that maybe emphasize one over the other a little bit more, and some of those are more obscure and not so mainstream anymore.
Well, but look, one of the similarities, and I don't want to be too simplistic, but I think it's a really striking thing. People who come to do Feldenkrais want to get better. They want to, move better, feel better. I love that. I said that for a long time. It's exactly the right thing to say, I think, or one of the right things. But people who engage, come to classes, get individual lessons, who, I always think as a Feldenkrais teacher, my aim is to inspire the students in my class to practice the method in their personal life. It's a way of self-improvement. The Feldenkrais method is physical, or I'd say neurophysical education for your life, because through your life, your body keeps changing. We have to keep up with that, but it's a way of bettering ourselves. And, often when people, many of the people that I've worked with over the years, they come because they have a problem. I worked for many years here in Santa Cruz, in one of the physical therapy clinics as a Feldenkrais teacher, seeing people with neurological problems and with chronic pain. And, even though people there were trying to get away from the pain, they were trying to better themselves. And I think that's a similarity with people who have a spiritual practice, who pray. They're doing that because they want to be better people. They want a better world. They want to be a part of that. And I think that's a place that resonates. And like the Feldenkrais method, a lesson isn't a pill. People come, they want a pill. They want something that will make them better. People who pray in whatever way you do that, right? They realize that it's something that you have to do regularly, right? That we remind ourselves. And for me, having a Feldenkrais practice means that I'm working on my coordination and how comfortable I am in my skin. and I'm refining my movement, you know, in relationship to things I love to do, like ride my bike, or you know, I play with it when I'm standing in the kitchen and chopping vegetables and cooking. But it, you know, it's a way, you know, like it's something I do when I feel good, because when I don't feel good, I had broken this arm and had to have surgery on it a few years ago. And so dealing with having the broken arm and recovering from surgery, you know, it's all the time I put into my practice when I wasn't feeling good. That also pays off at that moment. It's so, I think, recognizing the importance of that regular commitment to doing something, that, you know, getting better isn't a wish. It's not just your imagination. It is an action. It is something you engage in.
That's really big what you said. Getting better isn't a wish. It's an action.
Yeah.
Something you actively engage in. And I think that we would find people that will have, you know, different ideas about prayer, certainly. I was at a time in my life, I thought of prayer as something that I did that allowed an outside force to make some kind of change on my behalf or in my life. And now I would say I more recognize it as an activity that allows something to change in me in a more organic way. It allows me to feel connected to something larger than myself, and therefore not perhaps so alone in difficult times. And that something larger than myself it can be a spiritual deity, but it can be also to other people, that the action of prayer can make me feel more connected to other people. And in Feldenkrais, there's this quieting, this receptivity that comes through doing the lessons that I think potentially changes the prayer experience, because we are these physical beings, right? I mean, we're everything. We're this physical, emotional, spiritual being, but we do have these physical bodies, which give us a significant amount of life's challenges. And so anything that allows us to be better in our physical body seems to open the potential for a richer prayer life.
Right, and even the challenges that we face that aren't physical, limitations, or you know, or because we want to do some, you know, some activity, we want to do it, something that we love to do, we want to do it better, or we lost the ability to do it, we want to be able to do it again. I mean, there's that, but even things that aren't that are just the challenges in our lives, you know, our relationships, work, walking down the street, and, you know, whatever happens at the next moment, we live those physically, right? I mean, one quote I heard a long time ago, and one of our colleagues uses it on his, you know, the signature on his email, says, you know, it's a quote from the Buddha saying that the way to enlightenment is through the body. I think that speaks to me, you know, in our work, because we work through what someone is experiencing in the moment, right? And that is where spirituality and emotion and thought and action meet in our lived experience, in our physicality in the moment. And you know, without treading off into, you know, questions that no one's answered for thousands of years, you know, when I think about that from a Feldenkrais perspective, when I talk about changing our awareness, you know, Feldenkrais was struck by this idea of that on the motor cortex, you know, and on the sensory cortex, we have a somatotopic organization of that field of neurons. So in other words, somatotopic just means, you know, like psychosomatic is psychology and the physical. So it just means that the map of our body on our brains is arranged like a body. It's shaped like the map. It's kind of distorted because on the homunculus, on that image, that's, that array of neurons, that some areas like the thumbs are really big, and the lower back or the middle of your back is pretty small, and your lips are big, so there's but Moshe, Dr. Feldenkrais, took this, as what's happening in our experience of ourselves is, moderated through what's happening in our brain. Now, I'm not saying that we are our brains, because it's the signals from our brains to our fingers and from our fingers back that incorporates all parts of our nervous system. But this is I guess it's a level, if I'm going to talk about it, thinking about the incarnation. But, if we understand our nervous system, what happens is that we think about that our ability to coordinate our movement, like in whatever way we do it, how easily and gracefully or, clumsily and unevenly we do it, whatever that is reflected in part by what's happening in our central nervous system in this image. And the image stands for our experience and for kind of all the background processes happening in the nervous system. And I think what you were just talking about, there's there's the kind of concrete aspect of here's my body and how it moves. But if I go from, we just did a lesson in the morning study group, online study group for Feldenkrais teachers and trainees, and the other day, which was a really funny lesson about lying on your back and rolling up to sitting. And you're in a funny position when you do it, and it's pretty challenging, and it gets easier. And there's that moment of struggling with the difficulty, which is a different moment for different people. You kind of run into yourself, and what Feldenkrais lessons are about are, instead of running up against that and that the moment of difficulty, finding different ways of approaching it, going around it, underneath it, so it's no longer there. But there's something more than just yippee, my coordination changed, because all of a sudden my ability, I don't know, to use a word that people kick around a lot, my competence, right? My feeling of my own competence, my feeling of my being able to do things, that changes. And there's a delight in solving that puzzle, right? But it really changes, how I live in my skin. And I think for me, I'm a fairly practical person, and I'm fairly concrete. And but for me, that's a remarkable moment, because it's what you were talking about. I think in a way I didn't sit down and change myself. I didn't reprogram my brain, but somehow through my activity, through being able to do something to figure it out, that changes how I feel about myself, and it changes, and that reflects on how I'm moving, and those things happen together. And when I say, when I'm talking about changing consciousness or awareness, I think that's kind of what I'm trying to get at, the sense of who we are and how we are with ourselves.
Yeah, so in the how we are with ourselves, I think that, something that had never really occurred to me until you were just talking was that there might be correlations between how we run up against ourselves in lessons, and how we try to navigate, push through, give up, etc. In lessons. There might be some correlations between that, and also what our relationship is like with a higher power or powers, depending on your religious orientation. And so there might be an opportunity within the lessons themselves, as we discover more and more about ourselves, that carryover, I think this is what we're really interested in our work, is how does it carry over into the rest of life?
Yeah.
So that carryover perhaps could even offer something new for the prayer life.
Absolutely. Look, I think, you know, as Feldenkrais teachers, we begin with action, right? Not with thought, not with sensation, not with emotion, but with action. I mean, all these things are related, but this is our starting place. And so, but action is not separate from attitude, right? So my attitude towards the moment I get frustrated, how easy it is to find, how much, you know, like, do I respond to it like, oh boy, it's a puzzle, or oh shit, there I go again, or whatever it is. Those things are, they're married together. And so it's not, there's, you know, I could say how I take it with me, but part of that is how I and the teacher, the class, approach that moment of, you know, look, both in action and in attitude, you know, we're ruled by our habits, right? And that means that we do we do the same thing that we learned to do, whether it's the right thing to do at the moment or not. And because we've been doing it for so long, you know, I had a friend in high school who used to work at the donut shop. And you know, when she came to school, we all knew she'd been working at the donut shop because we could smell her like down the hall. She had no idea she was a walking donut because she was used to it, right? And I think with our actions, with our attitudes, with our awareness, we also get used to what's happening. So part of the practice is, how do you wake up to the things that you keep doing, that you know, I would say, you know, the outside of a habit is the behavior that you do all the time. The inside of the habit, the perception, this part of it, is habituation. The things you keep doing disappear. And so, you know, part of what's interesting to me in my own practice, just as a human being, like, how do I start to notice the things I've been doing over and over again? Because look, habits are what we know about everybody else. But how do I find mine? And I mean, hopefully my friends tell me, but you know, where does that come from? So that, from the teacher's perspective, not the student's perspective, I think about that as dishabituation. And to relate that to, you know, I mean, you could call that, from a spiritual perspective, lifting the veil of illusion. I think that is an equivalent thing. I'll say equivalent, not the same, but they're pointing towards something similar. And what I love about the method is, as a practice, I get to, you know, go around the corner and run into myself, wake up to myself in ways that are surprising and really awfully useful.
Very useful. When I think about what modern day prayer life looks like for a lot of people in the United States anyway, at least I would say for maybe Eastern approaches like Buddhism, we still see people sitting in oftentimes a cross-legged position with their hands held in specific kind of mudras. In Protestantism and even in Catholicism now, we see very little kneeling, very little genuflecting. It does happen in some churches, but not a lot, and actually often no real use of the hands anymore in prayer. But prayer, as it was originally developed in almost every culture, had quite a strong physical embodiment. So from the charismatic of, you know, holding arms in the air and opening up to God in a very robust kind of way, to a Muslim who is several times a day coming down onto that prayer rug and going into a full prostration with hands down, forehead on the ground, or walkabouts, or various ways. Prayer was a very physical expression. I think maybe less so now for some of us than it used to be. What are your thoughts about this physicality piece of it?
I attended Russian Orthodox Church for many years because the person I was married to was Russian Orthodox. And, you know, they stand all the time. And it was the church in San Francisco with the bell from Tsar Nicholas. And it didn't matter how old you were standing through the whole service, right? And then I think about, I run training programs in Amsterdam, Feldenkrais teacher trainings. And for the last few trainings, we were in a courtyard behind one of the oldest mosques in Amsterdam. And we've been in the upstairs part of that building. So every day we walk by and we look into the prayer room, right? And one time being silly, that I was talking about in class, and I thought, you know, just I could maybe it would bridge an important gap, but I was thinking about creating a series of awareness through movement lessons called Moshe for Muslims. But looking at that act of, I mean, like 5 times a day, and in studying for it, which, you know, studying by talking to people and by reading about prayer in different, you know, prayer and meditation. I don't want to put the two together, but I mean, I'm not saying they're separate or but let's say both of those. What was interesting to me in reading, like when I looked at modern Christian texts, Catholics and others, in religious education, not Sunday school, not for kids, but for adults, and so much of it was a description of what the person praying was doing physically in terms of the actual movements, and kind of the attitude, the emotion with which you approach that. And I thought it was everybody, whether there was movement or not, there was the physicality of it was really important. There's a book, I'm not remembering the name of it. It came out probably in the 60s, maybe early 70s, but it was somebody in Japan, along the theme of this track of the summit, who was looking at the physiology of the posture that people did Zen meditation in. That was, you know, and there, you know, that makes a big difference. The way in which you're, you know, if in meditation you want to either focus or empty your mind, depending on your practice, you know, being distracted by being uncomfortable is not the idea. And I don't think the idea is to turn off your body, to ignore it, right? And so there's a kind of a physical demand, even in stillness, right? And in engagement, like you can't escape yourself. And I think that's really interesting. One of the first forms of meditation that I learned, I mean, I started studying yoga thanks to Lilias Folan, living in upstate New York. As a teenager, I would run home to watch Lilias Yoga and You. And then when I was 18 years old, the summer I turned 19, I studied walking meditation. Or that was one of the forms of meditation that I was studying. And it was that, you know, I guess I was a fidgety kid. And so for me, having a practice that's about movement is what's important. And like, for me, it's important that you have a practice. I mean, not you personally, that I have a practice, that you have a practice, like, I would say that reminds you of your better self. That brings you to that. I mean, that's my experience of, you know, each Feldenkrais lesson, each awareness through movement class, I learned something particular about, I learned through the specifics, whether it's, you know, a lesson where you're walking all the time or on hands and knees or whatever. I'm learning to do some action, going from sitting to standing up or lying down to sitting. It's often in some unusual way, but, you know, in doing the action, it's not just that you know, it's, you know, when I say neurophysical, I think I'm not just educating my body, I'm changing my neurophysiology. And that can't change without changing my sense of myself, right? And I think it is important to have that practice, because otherwise, when you're feeling, you know, when you hurt yourself or when something difficult happens, then you're looking for making yourself feel better. If you have a way to be able to do that, you practice that every day, it's much easier when the going gets difficult. To be able to, you know, whatever that is, and I think it's like balance. Balance isn't a place. Balancing is something that you do. And it means falling off balance and coming back. That's how we maintain uprightness. And I think you know, you could take that as a physical metaphor for life. Life throws us off balance, right? I mean, shit happens. There's a reason the Greeks wrote tragedies, right? And so it's not like we can avoid that. So how do we deal with it? That's the question. And my best friend is a Nikkei Renkyo Buddhist, and, you know, staying at his house is like one of the best things in the world, because I wake up in the morning, or I'm already awake and doing something, and he starts chanting. And sometimes he chants for an hour, and he's a singer, has a beautiful voice, but I am carried by those vibrations, you know, and that for me is as powerful as getting on the floor or standing or sitting and doing a Feldenkrais lesson. You know, that's what works for him. And I think, you know, I think if our nature is that, you know, we learn something, it becomes automatic, that's good news. It means your nervous system is working, but, you know, habits also get in our way. And if things are going to happen that are difficult and we're going to respond to them in our habitual way, which may not be appropriate at the moment, you know, how do we update our choices? How do we keep challenging ourselves so that we don't settle on yesterday's solution? That's a lifelong question.
It certainly is. Not settling for yesterday's solution. Absolutely. So there's so many ways, as you just actually added a little bit more to the mix, so many ways for people to express themselves in prayer, from chanting, singing, dancing. Some groups have forms of ecstatic dance that are part of the process. There's just so many ways. But I think maybe you're going to give us a little movement lesson that involves.
Well, so for this series that I put together, the peculiar power of prayer, let me tell you, I had to, and I've never done this before or since, but I actually kind of market tested the title. I had to check it out because I didn't want to annoy any, I didn't want to piss anybody off. And, you know, so I had a few ideas which I rejected. I really like this, but I had to run it through the most scientisty, agnostic or atheistic people I knew, to my friends who are, you know, practicing Catholics and go to church regularly, and everybody in between. Because and what was great was that people were like, "Oh, what is that about?" You know, which is what it didn't seem to annoy anybody. Of course, I'm sure it did annoy someone, but what I took was the positions of the hands. So, you know, putting your hands either flat against each other or interlacing your fingers, as, you know, because you can think of these as Western mudras, as, you know, these significant, spiritually meaningful configurations of your hands. Let's go back to this idea of self-image, right? I mean, part of our self-image is has to do with the envelope of our skin and the contours, the boundaries of ourselves, as well as everything that's going on inside. When you put your hands together, something really odd happens. Because, you know, so my hand can feel itself. And I can feel kind of the glove of my skin, if you will. And I can feel the everything that, the meat of my hand, the muscles, and I can feel the bones, you know, and I can feel them tactily, but I can also feel them internally. I can make this distinction more or less. But that's kind of me feeling myself. But, you know, when I put one hand against the other, well, my right hand is feeling my left hand. And my left hand is feeling itself and the left hand. So you have each hand feeling itself, each hand feeling the other hand, and feeling both hands. It's like you have multiplied the states in which your nervous system is in, or how you're sensing yourself. We know that this is a really important developmental exploration. You know, infants touch themselves in different ways. You know, they stroke themselves, they pat themselves, but, you know, it's like everything else I touch, I only feel myself. But when I touch something else, I feel it. I mean, I feel the other thing, but it doesn't feel me when I touch something else. But when I touch myself, I feel it, but I also feel my hand, and I feel my hand feeling my leg. It's a really interesting, I think, part of how the nervous system is decoding itself. It's learning, this is me, this is not me. This is where I end. And so you know, when I think about changing our consciousness, I think that's kind of a cool moment. So the way that I teach lessons these days, because I have the same, I mean, I have this curiosity, right, about how do I take the lesson into life, or how do I connect the lesson to life? And so these days, I think part of my job as a teacher, my job description, is to give people a doggy bag. That's a very American thing, but to give them something they can take with them. And, you know, as a practice, and often it's not like the movement at the end, but it's something from the middle or the beginning of the lesson that you can play with, something really simple. You know, so I think of lessons and labs, you know, so that they come together, so that either during the lesson or after the lesson, either because I planned it or because something spontaneously happens, and not all the time, because that's boring, but often, more often than not, I'll give people something like homework, something to play with. And every lesson is structured so it has a vignette, a small section that you can do in a few minutes and play with on your own. So how about, let's try one of them. These are really simple. And to play along, I mean, you can watch if you want, but the idea is to do this yourself. You can look at your hands, you can close your eyes. If you start with your eyes closed, then a little while later, open them and take a look, and vice versa. So put your hands together and just notice. So, I mean, the other thing that's really cool here is that you have mirror images. So your little finger is touching its mate, its sibling, right? And then take your hands apart. And now, you probably felt your little finger, but what parts of your hand were touching? Your hands were touching each other. So not every part was touching itself. So if you put your hands back together again, like, so they kind of like along the fingers along their lengths, not pressing. So you're not trying to pancake, but just bring your hands together and feel so the pads of your fingers more than likely touch. And the heel of your hand is touching. And the heel of your hand is, that's the below your palm. And there's the base of your thumb on one side and the outer edge of your hand on the other. There's the base of your fingers, kind of the big knuckles at the base of your fingers. And then there's the rest of your fingers. So between your fingertip and your knuckles, do your fingers touch? Now you can look and see, but can you feel it from the inside? Like for most people, I mean, some people, they're flat, right? Some people, they're smushed up against each other, not because you're trying, but your fingers straighten easily. Some of us, the part of the finger between the pad and the base, the knuckle, don't touch. And some fingers touch and some don't. And then what about your thumbs? Are you touching like the pad of the thumb in the middle, or more the outside of the thumb, or the middle of the thumb? I mean, the outside of the thumb or the inside? Is the same side of the thumb touching the other thumb? I mean, these are all things that we notice that are happening in the moment. We can notice them when somebody asks us, when we pay attention. Most of the time, we're too busy doing something. But you'll notice what happens when you begin to pay attention to that. And then just take your hands apart. Put them down somewhere. And just feel how your hands feel at the moment. And what do you notice about your arms and your shoulders? Like, so some of you, when you lifted up your hands, you lifted up your shoulders, right? So maybe when you put your hands down, you'll feel a little bit of a residual tension in your shoulders. Some of you put your hands together and your face is relaxed. Some of you kind of squinted or scrunched up your face. So put your hands together again. And now, would you just lift one elbow? Doesn't matter which one. So you're just going to take your elbow, lift it up a little bit, and do it like really slowly. Like it's kind of floating up, and then just coming back down as slowly as you can. So this is an interesting movement. Your hands stay together. So you're moving your elbow at your wrist. Your forearm is moving. Don't move your hands. Your forearm is moving around your hand, and you're moving in your armpit. Now, you could be lifting up your shoulders. So would you do that? Just a few times, lift up your shoulder. You can leave your elbow down. Just take your shoulder, doesn't matter which arm, just keep doing the same one. Towards your ear a little bit, not as far as you can, go like half, and then come back down. Find out if you can do this like pretty slowly. The reason you want to go slowly is you want to, well, notice, like, can you feel your shoulder blade glide? Can you notice if your shoulder's coming forward, like more towards your nose than towards your ear? Or if it's going backwards, like towards the back of your head, can you bring your shoulder straight up? Can you do this without lifting your elbow? And then lower it slowly. Okay, and now can you lift your elbow and your shoulder together? So actually, that's it. Your elbow goes out to the side a little bit. I mean, you have to lift your elbow when you lift your shoulder. It'll come up along your body, or you can lift it up to the side. Okay, and now leave your elbow out to the side and lower your shoulder, and just lift and lower your shoulder, leaving your elbow out to the side. It has to lower a little bit, but don't bring it all the way down. Okay, and then bring your elbow down and lift your shoulder and drop it. And drop it. Do it a few times. Just lift it slowly and just let it drop. Good. And now lift your elbow a few times just by itself without lifting your shoulder. There you go. And now take your hands apart. And notice if you feel a difference. So one of the things that was interesting in teaching the class and in preparing for it, doing it with some friends and with some other people, um, doing some of these lessons in other classes, was that for people who prayed in this position, it what people said in different ways is it kind of made the position new and interesting again, rather than kind of like parking themselves in that position and doing whatever they did, but forgetting themselves physically what was going on, and bringing that act of noticing. And I think one of the things is that, like in my practice of, it's been 42 years, yeah, since I started doing awareness of the movement. The years do go by, and I still have limitations, or sometimes I have new ones I didn't have before. But what I've noticed is just how much kinder I am to myself, and to my students. And in noticing, oh wow, I did that without kind of the judgment or feeling bad. It's like, oh cool, that's how I'm stuck. Instead of, oh darn, there I did it again. Because once I notice what's happening, then I have awareness. And awareness is that way of noticing that just the noticing, like me changing, changes the world, because, oh yeah, I can do that. I can do it before. And I didn't notice that I didn't notice it before. I mean, that's the other weird thing, right? So one of the things I love about lessons is that they create that situation.
I just want to pull that out, that statement you just made. Me changing changes the world. That's a really important statement. Because if our perception, our experience of the world has changed, so therefore, for us, for me, the individual, the world has changed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be a megalomaniac about that, right? I don't, if I'm driving around in San Francisco, which is 7 miles by 7 miles, and the population keeps increasing, and it's a Friday night, and I want to find a parking space, or any big city anywhere in the world, I can't, changing my, I don't think that, I can manifest a parking space by changing
absolutely.
myself. But what, my way of knowing the world changes.
That's right.
And that's not an intellectual, it is a lived experience, and so whether you call that psychological or emotional or spiritual, it's my being in the moment. I guess I'm a phenomenologist when it comes right down to it, right? Like when I taught this class, I wanted to teach it not from the perspective of a scientist and not from a religious perspective, but from the perspective of being a Feldenkrais teacher, right? And to be able to merge these perspectives together. Yeah, anyways,
most of us
let's come back to, I'm sorry.
I said most of us only have the ability to affect our own experience, our own perception, our own, I mean, maybe there's some people in the world that can, impact the number of parking spaces, but that's not within the realm of our ability for most of us. Most of us, what we really can influence is how we respond to, as you said, the shit that happens, as how we respond to it, not whether it happens, as many things are out of our control, more or less.
Well, I mean, look, the things, as a Feldenkrais teacher, I think about what's happening at any moment as a combination of feeling, acting, sensing, and thinking. That there's these 4 aspects of ourselves. And they're related. I don't know anything about my action other than my sensation of it. I don't just act and sense, but I think sometimes about what I'm doing and often about what's happening. And I have a reaction. It's not just sensation. I have a feeling about what's happening. And all these things are together. The only things I have any choice about are my action and my attitude and my awareness, the focus of it, the attitude I bring. These things are just wedded together. And so my practice is about, really it's about listening to myself. I think it comes down to that. And, I don't think I can master my emotions. And I think emotions, feelings, attitudes, they have a half-life. Like when somebody scares you, your heart's still beating for a while. Or if you're annoyed driving me on the, somebody almost runs over me or stops right in front of me on my bike, I get past the moment, but I'm still responding to that. Physiologically, adrenaline's going through my system, and that's not going to be over right away. So, I think part of my practice is about how I approach my emotions. And there's a glib thing to say. I want to have emotions. I don't want them to have me. Both in my attitude, like how my habitual stance and perspective in the world, but also just, am I sad, or am I sad about being sad? Feldenkrais talked about the body pattern of anxiety, right? And the evolutionary, biological, physiological roots of this. Anxiety is a nice clinical way to say fear. And I think, like how, we become afraid. If somebody came to me and said, would you help me be unafraid? I would probably say no. Right? Because if somebody is unafraid, if they're counterphobic, meaning they're not afraid of anything, if you drive an ambulance or you paint buildings, a certain amount of that is valuable. But if you're really not afraid of things, that's foolish. Right? And so I don't like, for me, the practice, a lot of my practice is about what it means to be courageous. I think as Maya Angelou said, if you want to have a practice, the most important virtue is courage. Because you won't develop any of the other virtues if you don't have courage. Because it takes courage to face what's happening. And for me, courage is not the absence of fear. Fritz Perls, the founder of Gestalt therapy, said that fear is excitation without breath. Right? And so, it's freezing or it's stopping, or whether you fight or you run or you freeze up, you're trapped by that emotion. So for me, it's like in the lessons where I am challenged, or in the lessons where there's actually a scary moment, like there's this lesson when you're on your hands and your knees and you fall over, but like you're a table, like one piece. I think of it like as the Feldenkrais equivalent to a ropes course. It's scary, but it's just because, and I teach it, kind of to build up the, because it's like, what do you do in that moment? How do you practice responding in that moment and remembering to breathe, to not be so, not to be so uncomfortable with the fear that it becomes overwhelming or paralyzing. I think that's a really interesting part of the practice. And I think a lot of people would call that a spiritual practice too. Some people say there's fear or love.
So I think when I think about my own, probably most powerful times in my own prayer life. It is when I'm seeking courage. I mean, things are rough, and I know that I have to make it through that time. And I, no one wants to try to make it through a time that's difficult, cowered down. Sometimes it takes a lot to navigate the things that happen in life. So I think there's a definite similarity there that you're talking about that translates over again into the prayer life.
Well, and look, if we think about it, like what are we aiming for? One of our definitions of moving in the best way we can is this idea of movability. Whatever I'm doing, I have the option to move in any direction with equal ease without hesitation. But that's being like, again, Fritz Perls, being responsible, having the capacity to respond. And what interferes with that? Well, our habits. That keeps us from responding in a different way. Fear. And like, there's just, whether it's an emotional habit or whether you're limping, there's a certain momentum that a habit has. It keeps going forward, and to break that is, and also because when you're stuck in it, it's a habit of how fast you go or how slow you go. It's like coming off the highway and you're driving a nice, comfortable 82 miles an hour on a 75 mile an hour highway, and you hit a school zone and it's 15 miles an hour. It's like, it feels like all this weight on you, like, oh my God, this is horrible. How can I do this? I think it takes courage to face those moments, right? And to even want to face them. So yeah, and courage. I keep saying who I'm quoting because I think giving attribution is important. As Brene Brown says, or as she reminded me, courage, it comes from the French, cœur, the heart. It's probably Latin, right? And so courage means to have heart in the moment, to be wholehearted. What does it take to do that? And whether you think about that spiritually or psychologically, or for me, the practice in being wholehearted, to be able to just be here in this moment, without some people, their challenges or their disabilities, quote unquote, are visible. The way that they're different is visible. And for some people, it's just invisible. But I think we all have our challenges. And I think I'm always amazed by the incredible amount of courage so many people, need to manifest in their life every day. And also the consequence of that. Like when we hunker down, or when we ignore part of ourselves, or when we push ourselves through things despite the discomfort. And finding a way to do this in for me, in the Feldenkrais method, the easy way is hard enough. So how do I find, even in the most, not the easy way to do easy things, but how do I find in these challenging moments, and the smallest challenges sometimes seem so big, how do I find my way to deal with that? Not to run away, not to push through, but to know that I can learn, and to have these tools for being able to do that. That's my practice. And it's a very physical practice. But I think where it meets the idea of prayer is this commitment. Your practice is what you do because you do it. Doesn't matter whether you feel like it or not, or whether you want to. It's a promise you keep with yourself. And I think that's a really powerful thing too, just to keep that promise. right? And to have a way of honing yourself. I mean, the thing I like about our work is that we're dealing with gravity. Gravity is unforgiving. You can't lie to it. You can't pretend. It's either this way or it isn't. And so in that harshness and unforgivingness, in a way, there's a test that I keep coming back to, and that I'm also honing myself to that. That grounds me in the world that I'm in, and it cuts through my, like, well, I think I can do this, or I don't, I can't do whatever it is. It just, there's something very it is so real, and I can take that with me. Something about how I deal with the moment I got stuck in the lesson becomes how I deal with the moment when I'm like, one of the greatest things I learned becoming a Feldenkrais teacher is, when I'm sitting at my table and I'm lifting somebody's head and their head feels heavy or it doesn't move easily. The first thing I ask myself, even as I'm just beginning to lift and I feel that initial putting on the brakes, the hesitation or resistance, I mean, that's enough. The first thing I say is, well, how am I doing this so that they don't feel comfortable? Right? That question, like, what am I doing to contribute to what's happening? Holy moly, that has been one of the biggest changes in my life, because I'm in the middle of a discussion with somebody and that question appears. It's not like I want to ask it, but I think this sucks. And what am I doing? How am I contributing to this? Because I can change that. As long as I think about what's wrong with them or it or whatever, I can't do anything about that. So in a way, it's a very humbling question. And it's also a useful one. It's uncomfortable. I mean, I remember doing group therapy, and there's that moment when something happens in the group and one of the other members of the group or the therapist, bust you. They call you on your stuff. They point out to you that, you're having a conversation with somebody and they go, well, they may be yelling at you, but you started. Do you know that? Do you know you've been yelling the whole time? And you're like, really? And there's that moment of like, oh shit, I'm exposed. I hate this. But then there's that realization, like, I can do something about this. I think when you find that, and you find that in that way, whatever you call it, it is great to practice finding that. And to learn about yourself in that way.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you for giving us an experience. I just want to say what my experience was in that short, brief piece was just a beautiful opening and feeling of sensation along one side. So I've actually done your whole series with you, but as soon as we get off of here, I'm going to do the other side. And so for people out there that didn't do it, maybe when you do the replay, do take the time to do that short little movement piece. It's very powerful.
Well, and look, I will give, everybody who wants to sign up for it, I can, you can sign up for my, sign up on my website, get a free account.
We'll actually give them a link right below your replay,
Okay.
and on the schedule, they'll get a link so they can go out and sign up for your bonus lesson, we'll call it that, so they can have a full experience of one of your lessons.
Great.
That'll be fabulous.
And look, I want to say there's one other thing. I've been thinking about this since the beginning, and I don't want to end without saying it, but what was really funny, for me about this teaching the prayer workshop and how people responded. Like, one of our senior colleagues and teachers wrote to me and said, and this was the email, it was like, Larry Goldfarb, next line, prayer, next line, really? And because I think because I'm a movement scientist, and because I spent a lot of time in the community, talking about science and talking about the importance of the concepts and the language that we use, I think people think of me as a really sciencey kind of guy. And so they thought it was funny, or they were surprised by me talking about the subject. So I want to thank you for inviting me and having a chance to talk between these subjects, because you know, in the Feldenkrais world, what I discovered by teaching this workshop is how many people have brought the Feldenkrais method to their faith communities, and how many people, it was like, it was very funny in this context, but it was like people were coming out to me because they were known wherever they practiced, whether they did it in Sunday school or in retreats or during services, in all kinds of ways. People had brought what they did to their community, but they never talked about it in the Feldenkrais community. So I found out that there's so many people who have done this, and you know, you know, it's not like I invented it. I'm not the only one who has approached the subject, but it was exciting to see that, and exciting that a lot of people said, you know, I've been thinking about doing this, but I was afraid to do it. But now that I saw that you do it, I'm going to do it. So whether you're a teacher and you thought about bringing the work to your faith community, or, you know, or you're someone who practices the method in their daily life, I encourage you to explore these connections, to have the conversations across these boundaries so we can learn from each other.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's very potent. It's unfortunate maybe, and I don't know if it's just a response to our concern about being associated with a religion that has come out of the name, or sometimes being, you know, the method sometimes being referred to in a way that I don't agree with at all, which is sort of like it's a new agey approach or woo-woo approach. I don't know what that's about, but I think it makes sense. We take it to everywhere else in the world. Why would we not take it to our faith communities? It's another way of being human and exploring our lives, and it's a great topic that you've put a little bit more out in front of people. So I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, but Moshe himself, the founder, Feldenkrais, was, you know, he's a secular person, but as one of my friends here in town who's a rabbi, you know, we've talked about this a lot. His great grandfather was, you know, a really important mystic in the history of Judaism, and in many ways, there is a connection to those ideas about prayer and being in the world, that it's connected to the history of our work. You know, this idea of tikkun olam, of, you know, of healing the world, you know, that, and making ourselves better as a way of doing that. There's a root there. So I think it's important not to reduce Feldenkrais practice to prayer, but to see that there are connections and we can learn from each other. That's a good thing.
It is a good thing.
All right. Well, thanks again for asking me along.
Yeah.
And thanks for putting this together. It's an awesome way of, you know, letting people know what people do. And I think it's important to talk about what other people in the community are doing. And you've created a place for that to happen. I'm really grateful for that. Thanks.
Well, thank you for the appreciation, and thank you for being such a pioneer in getting the work out and into a variety of different formats. We really appreciate that. So everybody stands on each other's shoulders, and we get a blip in time where we can make a difference, and you put it out there and then you wait and see what happens, and somebody else picks it up and does something else with it. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, and we're better together. You know, I mean,
absolutely.
People practice the method in a lot of different ways. It's not prescribed. You know, whether you teach Feldenkrais and, you know, it related to yoga or riding horses or, you know, working in a factory, it doesn't, but working with each other, there is a social aspect to learning movement, right? And there's so many ways in which the method can be applied. I mean, a method's kind of like, I'd rather talk about what it does than what it is. You know, it's like chemistry. If you're a chemist, it's interesting, but you don't go to the grocery store or the gas station or the pharmacy and say, can I have some chemistry? you asked for what it does, you know, the thing you can eat or the put in the car or that will heal you as a result of doing that. The method is, you know, it's about how we act in the world, and any way of acting, it has something to contribute to. And I love seeing the different ways in which people do that. It's really pretty cool. We're not going to run out of applications.
We're definitely not going to run out of applications. Each summit, I think we find out there's so much for more variety than perhaps some of us realized or have explored. So we're definitely not going to run out of applications.
Anyways, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry, for being with us. And thank you all for being here with us in the Move Better, Feel Better Feldenkrais Awareness Summit. And we'll see you back at the next session. Goodbye.